Echoes of Heresy, A Philosopher's Exile, Chapter 1. The hum of the printing press, Amsterdam, 1656. The air hung heavy with the scent of ink and damp parchment. Sunlight, filtered through grimy windows, cast long shadows on the cluttered workbench. Here, amidst stacks of worn books and loose pages, sat a young Baruch Spinoza, barefoot and clad in a simple tunic. His dark hair tumbled past his shoulders as he meticulously sharpened a quill. Spinoza wasn't your typical scholar. He wasn't born into the halls of a grand university, nor did he yearn for the dusty pronouncements of ancient texts. Instead, his classroom was the bustling workshop of his father, a successful merchant dealing in Portuguese books. The rhythmic hum of the printing press, the steady hammering of nails, and the constant murmur of languages were the soundtrack to Spinoza's life. He devoured the books that surrounded him, not just the holy texts of his Sephardic Jewish heritage, but also philosophical treatises and scientific tracts. His mind, as sharp as the quill he wielded, thirsted for knowledge beyond religious dogma. The world, he felt, was a vast and intricate puzzle waiting to be deciphered. One crisp autumn morning, a commotion erupted outside the workshop. Baruch, momentarily distracted, looked up from his task. A group of men, their faces contorted in anger, were arguing with his father. Their words, though muffled, carried a chilling weight. They were from the synagogue, and the subject was clear: Baruch's heretical beliefs. A young Spinoza, barely 16, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had always been questioning, his thoughts straying beyond the boundaries of accepted faith. But now, the whispers that had followed him in hushed tones were becoming a dangerous storm. Chapter 2. The weight of exile weeks bled into months, the tension in the Spinoza household growing with each passing day. The visit from the synagogue elders had been a harsh awakening. Baruch, once a carefree scholar lost in the labyrinth of ideas, now felt the weight of scrutiny. His conversations with his closest friend, Frans van den Enden, a young medical student with a passion for logic, became hushed and coded. One evening, after the workshop shutters were locked, Baruch found his father slumped over a rickety table. Sorrow etched lines on the older man's face, deeper than any worry about finances had ever caused. The news had reached him: Baruch was to be summoned before the synagogue council. The threat of expulsion hung heavy in the air. "Baruch," his father finally spoke, his voice hoarse, "they say your ideas are a danger to the community. They speak of God differently." Baruch nodded, a bitter mix of anger and resignation churning within him. He believed in God, yes, but not in the vengeful deity of the synagogue's pronouncements. His God was a God of reason, a force woven into the very fabric of the universe. It was a belief he couldn't deny, a truth that resonated in the very core of his being. The following days were a blur of whispered arguments and tearful goodbyes. Baruch, with a heavy heart, packed a meager bag. He would be leaving his family, his home, the world he knew. The synagogue council, in a desperate attempt to maintain order, had pronounced a cherem, a formal expulsion from the Jewish community. As Baruch stepped onto the cobblestone streets, the weight of his exile settled upon him. He was a lone scholar, cast adrift in a sea of uncertainty. But amidst the fear, a flicker of defiance sparked in his eyes. He would not be silenced. His search for truth, his quest to understand the nature of God and existence, had just begun. The world, vast and indifferent, awaited him. Chapter 3. Finding refuge in Reason. Amsterdam, a city of canals and contradictions, offered Baruch both isolation and a curious kind of freedom. He found refuge in a modest room above a cobbler's shop, the rhythmic hammering a comforting counterpoint to the cacophony of his own thoughts. Necessity, the mother of invention, propelled him to a new trade: lens grinding. Hours spent meticulously shaping a piece of glass became a meditative practice, a way to channel his swirling anxieties into a pursuit demanding meticulousness and focus. His evenings, however, belonged to the pursuit of knowledge. By the flickering candlelight, he devoured the works of Descartes, whose emphasis on reason resonated deeply with him. He delved into the vast philosophical landscape, from the Stoics to the Renaissance thinkers, each idea adding a piece to the intricate mosaic of his burgeoning worldview. Loneliness, however, was a constant companion. Excommunicated from his faith, ostracized by some members of his former community, Baruch yearned for intellectual companionship. A beacon of light appeared in the form of Franz van den Enden, his friend from his pre-exile days. Their meetings, initially held in secret, became a vital source of solace and intellectual stimulation. Together, they dissected philosophical arguments, debated the nature of reality, and found solace in the pursuit of shared truths. Franz, a man of quick wit and a sharp intellect, became more than just a friend, but an intellectual sparring partner. Their discussions, often heated and passionate, forced Baruch to refine his own ideas. He discovered that exile, though painful, had an unexpected benefit. Free from the rigid confines of his former life, his mind could explore uncharted territories. One evening, as they sat hunched over a worn copy of Euclid's Elements, Franz turned to him, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "Baruch," he said, "wouldn't it be fascinating to apply the logic of mathematics to understand God and the universe?" Baruch, a spark igniting in his own eyes, smiled. This, he realized, was the beginning of a grand adventure. A quest to build a philosophy based on reason, one that reconciled the divine with nature and the human mind with the vastness of existence. Chapter 4. The Grindstone and the Grand Design years blurred into one another, marked by the rhythmic rasp of the grindstone and the quiet hum of intellectual pursuit. Baruch, now a skilled lens grinder, had carved out a modest existence in Amsterdam's bustling heart. His days were a carefully choreographed dance between the practicalities of earning a living and the intoxicating world of ideas. The workshop, cluttered with glass pebbles and grinding tools, became an unexpected haven for philosophical exploration. As he meticulously polished a lens, his mind would grapple with complex problems. How does the human mind perceive the world around it? Is free will an illusion? Or do we have the power to shape our destinies? Was God, as he envisioned it, a conscious entity, or the very essence of reality itself? These questions, whispered in the quiet moments between grinding strokes, formed the seeds of his magnum opus, a work he tentatively titled Ethics. Fueled by late-night discussions with Franz and fueled by his own insatiable curiosity, Baruch meticulously laid out the foundations of his philosophy. He started with a radical proposition. God, or what he termed substance, was not a separate entity, but the very fabric of existence. Nature, in all its infinite complexity, was synonymous with God. This substance possessed an infinite number of attributes, of which the human mind could only comprehend two: thought and extension. The concept was revolutionary, a stark departure from the prevailing Judeo-Christian notion of a personal God. It challenged established religious doctrines and threatened to upend the very foundation of society. Yet, for Baruch, it was a revelation, a way to reconcile his faith in reason with the grandeur of the universe. However, the path of a revolutionary thinker is rarely smooth. Whispers of his unorthodox ideas began to spread beyond the confines of his workshop. Religious leaders viewed him with suspicion, wary of his influence on young minds. Even Franz, usually a staunch supporter, expressed concern. "Baruch," he said one evening, his voice laced with worry, "are you sure your ideas are ready for the world? The repercussions could be severe." Baruch, his gaze fixed on a half-polished lens, remained silent. He knew the risks involved. Yet, the truth, as he saw it, demanded to be written. The world, he believed, needed a new way of thinking, a philosophy based on reason and understanding, not blind faith. He would continue his work, come what may. The grindstone might shape lenses, but his pursuit aimed at a far greater design, a philosophy that could illuminate the very nature of reality itself. Chapter 5. The echo chamber and the seeds of doubt years bled into a decade, each sunrise ushering in a new day of grinding and grappling with grand ideas. Baruch, a man of quiet intensity, had become a fixture in the intellectual circles of Amsterdam. His reputation as a brilliant but unorthodox thinker preceded him. A small group of students, drawn to his radical ideas and his calm demeanor, gathered around him, forming a tightly knit circle. They were a diverse group, a young physician questioning the nature of the mind-body connection, a budding mathematician fascinated by the harmony of numbers, and a disillusioned cleric yearning for a more rational faith. In his sparsely furnished room above the cobbler's shop, Baruch held court, his words sparking lively debates that stretched late into the night. He expounded on his philosophy, his voice rising in passionate explanation when challenged. Yet, a nagging doubt began to creep into his mind. Was he creating an echo chamber, a space where his ideas were simply amplified without encountering serious critique? The world outside his circle remained largely indifferent, or worse, hostile. One evening, a new face appeared at his doorstep, a renowned theologian from a nearby university, known for his sharp wit and even sharper tongue, had requested a meeting. A tremor of apprehension ran through Baruch's group. This was not a friendly encounter. The theologian, a man of imposing stature and piercing blue eyes, launched into a scathing critique. He accused Spinoza of atheism, of undermining morality, of unraveling the very fabric of society. Spinoza, ever calm and collected, defended his ideas with reasoned arguments. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the theologian's barbs had struck a tender spot. His carefully constructed philosophy, once so elegant in its simplicity, now seemed vulnerable. Was he missing something? Was his understanding of God and the universe too neat, too devoid of the mystery and awe that religion traditionally instilled? These questions gnawed at him, forcing him to re-examine his own assumptions. The encounter, though unsettling, proved to be a turning point. Baruch realized the importance of engaging with opposing viewpoints, of allowing his philosophy to be tested against the fires of criticism. He began to modify his approach, seeking dialogue rather than blind discipleship. The pursuit of truth, he conceded, was not a solitary endeavor, but a collective journey. Chapter 6. The price of publication. The year was 1670. Baruch, his hair now streaked with gray, sat hunched over a massive manuscript. The culmination of years of relentless work, his Ethics, was finally complete. It was a dense tome, a logical labyrinth that laid bare the foundation of his philosophy. Yet, a new dilemma gnawed at him: publication. The memory of the theologian's scathing critique was still fresh. He knew his ideas would be met with fierce opposition. The religious establishment would likely brand him a heretic, potentially jeopardizing the fragile peace he had built in Amsterdam. But remaining silent felt like a betrayal of his own intellectual integrity. Franz, ever the pragmatist, urged caution. Baruch, he warned, publishing this could exile you not just from the Jewish community, but from Amsterdam altogether. You have built a life here, a community of students who respect you. Is it worth risking all that? Baruch, his gaze fixed on the manuscript, wrestled with the decision. He envisioned copies of his work being burned in public squares, his name dragged through the mud. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, a voice within him, the voice of reason that had guided him for so long, refused to be silenced. He confided in his students, gauging their reactions. While some expressed apprehension, others, inspired by his courage, urged him to publish. A young scholar named Ludwig Meyer stepped forward, offering a solution. He would take the manuscript to a printer in a different city, one less likely to be swayed by religious pressure. Baruch, a flicker of hope rekindled in his eyes, agreed. He meticulously reviewed the manuscript one last time, making final edits. The weight of the decision settled upon him. He was not just publishing a book, he was taking a stand for intellectual freedom, for the right to question established beliefs. As Meyer, cloaked in anonymity, embarked on his journey with the manuscript, a wave of uncertainty washed over Baruch. He had sown the seeds of his philosophy, but would they take root or be trampled underfoot by the storm of opposition he knew was coming? Only time would tell. Chapter 7. Echoes of Heresy. Months trickled by, each day an agonizing wait for news. Baruch, his usual calm demeanor tinged with anxiety, found himself constantly drawn to the window, scanning the street for any sign of Meyer's return. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the lively debates that once filled his room. His students, sensing his unease, tried to keep his spirits high. They delved into other philosophical works, dissecting arguments from Hobbes and Locke, seeking solace in the shared pursuit of knowledge. Yet, a shadow of worry hung over their discussions. The fate of ethics remained an unknown, a potential catalyst for a storm they all feared. Finally, one gloomy afternoon, a knock on the door shattered the tense silence. Baruch's heart leaped into his throat as he rushed to open it. Meyer stood on the doorstep, his face etched with disappointment. The news he carried was grim. The printer, a man more concerned with profit than philosophy, had balked at the manuscript's controversial content. Rumors of its heretical nature had preceded it, and he feared the repercussions of publishing such a work. Meyer, despite his best efforts, could not sway him. Dejection settled upon Baruch like a thick fog. Years of work, a lifetime of contemplation, seemed to vanish before his eyes. His students, their faces mirroring his own despair, offered words of comfort, but they rang hollow. Yet, amidst the disappointment, a spark of defiance flickered within Baruch. He wouldn't let fear silence him. He had a small circle of dedicated students, a community that valued his ideas. Perhaps, he thought, publication wasn't the only path to disseminate his philosophy. He decided to circulate handwritten copies of Ethics amongst his trusted students. The process would be slow, the reach limited, but it offered a safer, albeit less impactful, way to share his work. As he meticulously copied sections of the manuscript, a newfound resolve hardened within him. His ideas, even if they didn't reach a wider audience, would live on, passed down through generations of seekers like himself. The pursuit of truth, he realized with renewed determination, was a marathon, not a sprint. Chapter 8. A legacy forged in glass. Life in Amsterdam continued, a quiet rhythm punctuated by the clatter of grinding tools and the hushed murmur of philosophical discussions. Baruch, having come to terms with the delayed publication of his Ethics, channeled his energy into his students. His workshop became a makeshift classroom, where complex ideas were debated with a mix of intellectual rigor and youthful enthusiasm. One of his most promising pupils was a young woman named Veronica van der Linde. With an insatiable curiosity and a mind as sharp as the lenses Baruch crafted, she quickly became his most ardent disciple. Her questions, often challenging his assumptions, forced him to refine his own arguments. Their late-night discussions, fueled by flickering candlelight and a shared passion for knowledge, transcended the boundaries of teacher and student, forging a deep intellectual bond. Baruch, a man who had always guarded his emotions, found himself drawn to Veronica's unwavering support and her genuine interest in his work. He confided in her his anxieties about the future of his philosophy, the fear that his ideas might be lost to the sands of time. Veronica, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the candlelight, surprised him with her pragmatism. "Baruch," she said, "your ideas are too important to be confined to a single manuscript. We can find ways to preserve them, even if it means being discreet." Inspired by her words, Baruch began meticulously recording his ideas in the margins of seemingly mundane texts, medical journals, political treatises, even religious pamphlets. These coded messages would be a hidden legacy, waiting to be deciphered by future generations who shared his thirst for knowledge. He also started a new project, a treatise on political philosophy. Witnessing the growing political turmoil in Europe, he believed that reason could play a crucial role in establishing a just and tolerant society. His ideas, though still rooted in his pantheistic view of God, advocated for individual liberties and a democratic form of government. Veronica, ever the astute observer, noticed a subtle shift in Baruch's demeanor. The disappointment over ethics had given way to a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a philosopher wrestling with grand ideas. He was becoming a strategist, a man weaving his legacy into the very fabric of everyday life. As the years passed, their bond deepened, a quiet companionship that offered solace and intellectual stimulation. Though they never explicitly declared their love, theirs was a connection forged in the shared pursuit of truth, a testament to the power of ideas to transcend social boundaries and ignite a connection that defied definition. Chapter 9. Shadows on the Grindstone. The year was 1677. A cough, once a mere nuisance, had become a persistent shadow clinging to Baruch. His once steady hand trembled slightly as he polished a lens, the rhythmic grinding now punctuated by shallow gasps for air. Though his body weakened, his mind remained sharp, a testament to the life he had dedicated to intellectual pursuits. News from the outside world reached him in hushed tones, whispers of the growing backlash against his ethics, even in its limited circulation. Pamphlets denouncing his ideas as heretical had begun to appear, labeling him an atheist and a subversive. The students, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear and defiance, rallied around him, a testament to the impact his teachings had made. One evening, Veronica, her eyes filled with concern, sat beside him. "Baruch," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the doctors, they say your illness is advanced." Baruch, his voice raspy but firm, nodded. He had known for some time that his time was limited. Yet, he felt a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction with the life he had led. He had lived a life of the mind, defying convention and searching for truth in the face of opposition. He looked at Veronica, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Their shared journey, though unconventional, had been a source of strength and solace. In her, he had found not just a student, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the power and importance of his ideas. "Veronica," he began, his voice weak but resolute, "my work, it must continue. The manuscripts, coded messages, they hold the key." Veronica, tears welling up in her eyes, placed a hand on his. "We will not let your ideas die, Baruch. We will find a way to share them with the world, even if it takes generations." A flicker of a smile touched Baruch's lips. He had sown the seeds of his philosophy, and even though he wouldn't see them blossom, he knew they would continue to grow. In Veronica and the students he had nurtured, he saw the torch being passed, the pursuit of truth continuing. As days turned into weeks, Baruch's strength waned. Yet, his spirit remained unbroken. He spent his final days dictating his last thoughts to Veronica, fragments of philosophy interwoven with personal reflections. On a crisp September morning, with Veronica by his side, Baruch Spinoza breathed his last. The world outside continued its relentless march, oblivious to the passing of a quiet revolutionary. Yet, within the walls of the cobbler's shop, a fire flickered, the fire of ideas, of intellectual courage, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. It was a fire that Veronica, and generations of thinkers to come, would keep alive. Chapter 10. The unfinished symphony. Nearly a century had passed since Baruch Spinoza's quiet passing. Europe had undergone a tumultuous transformation. The Enlightenment, a movement that championed reason and individual liberties, had begun to take root. Ironically, the ideas Spinoza had championed in secret were finding a receptive audience, albeit unknowingly. Veronica van der Linde, her hair now streaked with silver, sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by dusty books and forgotten manuscripts. Time had etched lines on her face, but her eyes still held the spark of intellectual curiosity that had captivated Baruch all those years ago. In her hands, she held a worn copy of a medical journal, its margins filled with cryptic notes in Baruch's distinctive handwriting. Years of meticulous work had finally paid off. With the help of other like-minded individuals, Veronica had painstakingly deciphered the hidden messages, a treasure trove of philosophical insights. Carefully, she transcribed the notes into a clean manuscript, a testament to Baruch's legacy. This wasn't just a historical document. It was a call to action, a plea for a world ruled by reason and tolerance. The publication of the Spinoza Legacy, as the manuscript was titled, sent a tremor through the intellectual world. Here were ideas remarkably similar to those espoused by the Enlightenment thinkers, yet penned decades earlier by a man ostracized as a heretic. Philosophers devoured the text, their minds grappling with Spinoza's unique perspective on God, nature, and the human mind. Though some dismissed him as an eccentric, others found in him a kindred spirit, a bold thinker who dared to question the established order. Baruch Spinoza's story became a legend whispered in the halls of academia, a cautionary tale of the perils of free thought, but also a testament to its enduring power. His ideas, like seeds scattered on fertile ground, had taken root and bloomed, even after generations. Veronica, now an elderly woman celebrated for her meticulous work, knew her role was complete. The legacy, once hidden in the margins of a forgotten journal, now stood on its own, ready to engage with the world. As she closed the manuscript, a sense of bittersweet satisfaction washed over her. Baruch may have lived in the shadows, but his ideas, like the faint glow of a distant star, had finally reached their destination, illuminating the vast intellectual landscape for generations to come. His symphony, unfinished in his lifetime, now played on, a haunting melody urging humanity towards a brighter, more enlightened future.